All right, Ronan MMA, welcome back to the channel. Now, first, let's address the elephant in the room. Yes, I look like the kind of person that is confused about my gender. I assure you, I am not. I am a 28-year-old red-blooded male who has a baby face when he shaves, okay? And I'm getting my neck tattooed on Saturday, and I didn't want to just shave a chunk of my beard off because it would have gotten in the way. So I just took it all off. I'm going to keep it off until Saturday. So relax, okay? But to counteract the fact that I look like somebody who has pronouns in my bio, we are going to be going after possibly the most progressive MMA YouTuber, the ogre of MMA YouTube, MMA Joey, okay? Because he did a video, once again, virtue signaling to the masses, pretending like he has an unpopular opinion, defending Ian Garry, all of the statements he made regarding Neil Magny, and some other things that he seemingly is a little bit upset about. We're gonna go over, pardon me, all of that and more. Before we get into it, please like and subscribe. I would greatly appreciate it. Now, as usual, his 23 minute long video could be broken up into about 7 minutes. I'm going to even speed the parts up that I do play for you because the guy talks about as fast as he looks like he could run, okay? He does not talk fast at all. And something that's very weird that I just noticed, he opens his mouth unbelievably wide and he gets a insane amount of saliva buildup in his cheeks. It looks like he might have rabies. If you don't believe me, go and see for yourself. Zoom up on him later on in the video once he's been talking for a little bit, but regardless, let's get into it. Okay, so the first point I want to go over, because as usual there were a bunch of points that could just be taken out because they were so unbelievably stupid and could only be thought up by the Shrek of MMA YouTube.
And people keep saying, oh, how can he not finish a guy with no legs? Why do you think he had no legs? Why do you think he had no legs? Because Ian Garry destroyed his legs. It goes back to the same thing of Bilal Muhammad versus Gilbert Burns. Oh, he couldn't finish Gilbert. Gilbert had no shoulder. Well, what happened? Where did he get that shoulder injury? It happened in the fight. Stop acting like Neil Magny came in and had no legs coming into the fight, and Ian Garry couldn't finish him anyway.
Now, he says he's getting a lot of hate, and this is an unpopular opinion and this and that, but people saying, how could he not finish a guy with no legs? Well, Ian Garry is the one that destroyed his legs. How do you think it happened? Blah, 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 blah. It's the same way as people saying Bilal Muhammad couldn't finish Gilbert Burns with one arm, even though the injury happened in the fight. It was caused by Bilal Muhammad. Okay, well, first of all, fuckface, while he may have been the one that destroyed Neil Magny's leg, he did so in the first 30 seconds. Now, I want to preface this. I wasn't even really one of the people that was harping on him for not getting a finish in this instance, because it is what it is, man. It was a very dominant performance against a guy who, by the way, took the fight on 6 days' notice, had absolutely no time to prepare. But I think the criticism could be valid, okay, because as he says himself, he's the one that destroyed his legs. The very first leg kick Ian Garry threw sat Neil Magny on his ass. So for the rest of the fight, 14 minutes, 30 seconds, or however long it was, that dude was falling down every time you touched his legs and you couldn't finish him. Neil Magny has no power in his hands, and with no legs under him, he's got even less, okay? So he could have been maybe a little bit more aggressive. He could have maybe gone for the finish. Again, I wasn't really one of the ones that was going after him for it, but I think it's a valid point. The guy is old, long in the tooth, took it on 6 days' notice, and you beat the brakes off of him so badly that he wasn't even really doing anything back. You know what I mean? Neil Magny was hardly fighting back. Ian Garry probably could have gotten a little more aggressive and gone for the finish, considering, unlike Jeff Neal, Neil Magny does not have any power to swing back on him with, okay? It is what it is. This is just the beginning. This one isn't even really the worst point that he made, but he did make it. He's upset that people are disparaging Ian Garry for not getting a finish over a 35-year-old Neil Magny who's had a ton of fights and has taken a ton of damage. But regardless, we're going to get to point number 2, okay? He's upset about the cut comments.
Now, another thing, I never thought I would ever talk about this in a video, but I had to include it in this video, and I had to research this beforehand because I really never even bothered to care about this before. But there was a lot of people that dislike Ian Garry who were so focused on the fact that he has the name Machado in his name. He changed his name from Ian Garry to Ian Machado Garry. And I've seen a lot of people say, Ian Garry's a cuck. Ian Garry took his wife's ex-husband's last name. And I've kind of ignored it. I've seen it countless times, honestly, probably over 100 times in the last 2 weeks alone. They're like, oh, this guy, look at him. He's taking his wife's ex-husband's last name. What a weirdo. What a cuck. That's a common thing. For some reason, the MMA fan base is just infuriated about another man's last name or hyphenated last name or whatever you want to call it, double last name. So I went ahead and Googled it. I'm like, is this even true? I don't know if this is even true because I've never worried about it. As a grown man, I've never personally wondered about another grown man's last name. And I found out, according to John Anik and Megan O'Leary, they say further dove into the matter to explain more. His wife, Layla, is Brazilian, and Machado was her last name. She has a son who also has Machado in his name. Further, O'Leary added, now they're expecting again. They wanted to make sure that their brothers had a name in common, so they felt like they were all one big family with co-parenting. So they all added it to their name so no one left out. So Ian Garry added Machado to his name It's his wife's maiden name. It's not her ex-husband's name, because she had a child from a previous marriage whose last name is Machado, and she wanted her new son and her previous son to have the same last name. So they all said, well, let's have Machado in their last name. So Ian Garry became Ian Machado Garry. There's no problem with that. There's no problem with that. And apparently it's customary in Brazil for a husband to take a wife's last name. I've never seen so many people so just disgusted with another grown man's last name.
Which this to me is the funniest fucking part of the video, okay? The last name thing. Hey, pal. We all know the reason for it, okay? Because he tells us about the reason. Oh, well, from John Anik himself and Megan O'Leary and this and that and this and that. We know the fucking stated reason. I, for one, think that if her last name was Smith, all they would have done was add Garry to all of their names. He only took Machado because it's a famous name in the combat sports world. Jean-Jacques Machado is one of the most heralded jiu-jitsu coaches of all time. I believe he gave Eddie Bravo his black belt, and then Eddie Bravo went on to create 10th Planet and is now handing out black belts to other people. Joe Rogan got his black belt from Jean-Jacques Machado, as did a ton of other people. He comes from a legit lineage of Gracies, if I'm not mistaken. If her last name was some bullshit that was not relevant to combat sports, I don't think he would have taken it, because the reason, well, we wanted everybody to share at least one name. They could have just added Garry to every single one of their names, and the same thing would have been accomplished, okay? So, anyways, he also points out, and this is very disingenuous, and I'm a little bit irritated about this, and it's funny, I find it hilarious that he'll show you the quote from John Anik, the quote from Megan O'Leary, as like evidence, and then he'll just quickly brush over this part without giving you any evidence, without putting any screenshot up on the screen. But he says that it's custom for men in Brazil to take their wives' last names. I could not find this anywhere, and I doubt he could either, okay? Because I spent at least 15 minutes searching in different ways, different wordings, things like this. I could not find a single source that says it is custom for husbands to also take their wife's last name. What is custom is for the children, okay, to take both last names, or in some cases, they take the dad's first name as their first last name, hyphenated, or de in between, okay? So Rogerio de Lima, Rogerio is most likely his dad's first name, Lima is most likely his mother's first name. That's how they create that last name, pardon me, and that's how they create that last name, with the father's first, the mother's last. It is not custom, okay? But it is also not custom for the wife to take the husband's name. They say that the children just get hyphenated last names, not the fucking husband, the children. Ian Machado Garry, while he's young enough to be his wife's child, okay, he's not. He's her husband. It's not custom. I'll put it up on the screen for you. There's nowhere on the internet that says that is custom. Now, there are options, obviously. You could if you wanted to, but it's not fucking custom. The wife could also decide she doesn't want the husband's last name. She could also decide to hyphenate it, or she could just flat out take the husband's last name. Okay, we've got tons of Brazilians in the UFC that have one last name. Charles Oliveira is just the first one that I can think of off the top of my head. There are some that have the hyphenated or the dual last names, but it's not because the dad took the wife's last name, okay? It's just not. So it's very disingenuous of him. He doesn't show you any proof. He just goes over that quickly, pretends like he does the research that he fucking didn't, okay? Now, anyways, let me just check my notes here. Also, dude, the cuck thing is a fucking joke. Obviously, dude. We know what a cuck is, and we would never know if Ian Garry actually is a cuck unless we were a fly on the wall in his bedroom, okay? The joke is that a guy who's willing to take his wife's last name is also the type of guy that would sit in a fucking chair in the corner of the room and watch his wife get plowed by her ex-husband, who, by the way, is Ian Garry's nutritionist, okay? They all hang out together. They're all one big happy family. You do you, dude. That's not my thing. I don't think I would ever, like, thankfully, I'm not in that situation. My kids are my kids, not my stepkids, but regardless, okay? It's fucking a joke. It's a joke. And he acts as though people are actually angry about the fact that he took his wife's last name. Nobody's fucking angry, dude. We're making fun of him. I don't understand this. He acts as though it's so strange for grown men to care about another grown man's last name. I never would think about this. I can't believe I even have to. Bro, it's a fucking joke. The guy took his wife's last name. That's some cuck shit, okay? That's all people are saying. We would never know unless we were a fly on the wall and we got to see Ian Garry actually watching his wife get railed. But the type of guy that would take his wife's last name is also the kind of guy that would like that sort of shit, okay? Moving on. This fucking little whiny bitch, bro. And also, dude, one more thing before we move on to the next point. The kind of guy that gets upset about people making fun of another guy, calling him a cuck, is also the type of guy that would sit in a room and watch his wife get fucked by some young athletic man, because MMA Joey looks like he hasn't seen his own cock in years. He probably has no idea how it works. So I would imagine he's so offended by this because it hits a little close to home. Moving on to the third point, okay?
Let's take a look at what Neil Magny actually said in the pre-fight presser in the lead up to UFC 292, and then we'll come back and react to it.
And there's a whooping you give your son now. I'd like to kind of teach him life a little bit. And being a father, I've become quite accustomed to that kind of whooping now, and that's kind of what I'm looking forward to giving on Saturday.
So there you hear Neil Magny himself. There's a beating that you give your son to teach him a life lesson. And as a dad, I've become accustomed to giving those beatings, and that's the type of beating I'm going to give Ian Garry on Saturday night. Neil Magny said he was accustomed to giving out those type of beatings now that he's a dad. Okay? How frequently is he giving out these types of beatings? How frequently that he's accustomed to it? Because guess what? His son is 3 years old. His son is 3 years old. Now, Ian Garry called him out for this. Ian Garry used this to kind of build a narrative, to hype up this fight, and to use it as fuel and motivation to go out there and beat up Neil Magny. And a lot of people are saying, oh, that's not what Neil Magny meant. It was a joke. It was bad, cringy trash talk, this and that. Neil Magny basically said, I physically abused my 3-year-old son. He said, I have become accustomed to giving out those beatings. And I understand people are going to say, oh, Neil Magny was joking. He misspoke, this and that. Neil Magny's had plenty of time to say, oh, no, that's not exactly what I meant. He's had a press conference since then. He's had plenty of times to say, look, that's not what I meant. That's taken out of context. I misspoke. He hasn't said a word. He has a 3-year-old son that he is accustomed to beating. His son has basically lived barely over 1,000 days, and he's accustomed to beating him. How many of those days are you beating your son? That's what I would like to know. Look, if you're imposing physical harm on children, I think you are an absolute embarrassment. And what's really disgusted me about this is the fact that the MMA community is so willing to die on that hill defending Neil Magny and saying, oh, Neil Magny meant this, Neil Magny meant that. I'm going to take Neil Magny at his words, that he's accustomed to giving out those types of beatings. But to imply that you're causing physical harm on a 3-year-old child, I think it's an embarrassment. And I'm glad Ian Garry called him out for it. Thing about on a 3-year-old child, you need to be institutionalized. Someone needs to call Child Protective Services. I just don't believe that you should be physically abusing a 3-year-old child. I don't believe you should be abusing any child. And I think it's an embarrassment that Neil Magny basically openly admitted to it.
Now I want to start it off by reading you the Neil Magny quote him. Fucking hell, dude. I want to read you what Neil Magny actually said, okay? 4th, 5th time's the charm. Who knows how many tries that took, but regardless. There's a whooping that you give your son to teach him about life a little bit. And being a father, I've come quite accustomed to that type of whooping. Now, and that's the kind of whooping I'm looking forward to give on Saturday night. Okay. First of all, I want to point out that on my video regarding Ian Garry last week, I used the exact same verbiage when I spoke about what black parents do to their kids. I said, look, I'm not being fucking racist. Black parents whoop they children. That's what I said. Quote me. Dude, go back and check. I said whoop. Neil Magny says it himself, pardon me. He doesn't say beat. He doesn't say abuse. He says I whoop my kids. And look, man, it is a fact, okay? Black parents, more than any other race of parents, use physical discipline. I've brought proof this time, so you cannot say that I'm being racist or stereotyping. In 2011, 89% of black parents beat their kids or used physical discipline. Now, he goes and he acts as though he wants to actually use Neil Magny's word, and he goes as far as to play you the clip of Neil Magny. Immediately following, changes every single time Neil Magny said whoop to beat. Every time he says beat, and he says it emphasized, so get the point across, Neil Magny's beating his kids. Fucking hell, dude. I'm gonna point this out. First of all, that's unbelievably disingenuous, okay? Unbelievably disingenuous. But I am not somebody that physically disciplines their children. I'm just not, okay? I don't have to. That's the point. I have 2 young sons. Now, Jesse on Fire went on a massive fucking rant. I'm not going to include it in this video because it's too long, talking about how if you have sons, you almost have to. Because, you know, if you tell them not to do something and they don't do it, and then you tell them more sternly and they don't do it, then you grab their arm really fucking hard, you look them in the eyes and you say, don't fucking do that. And if they still do it, what else can you do? And he says you have to spank them at that point. Okay, well, first of all, if you get to the point where after all of those warnings, your child's still not listening to you, you're not doing a very good job, okay? You're just not. Because here's the thing. I've never once hit my fucking kids. All I have to do is look at them and they stop whatever it is they're doing. If they're giving their mother grief, I look at them, they stop immediately, without question, and they fucking go on about their day, okay? And I have two very different children. My 7-year-old is a violent fucking savage who, at any given point in the day, you better watch your neck because he will jump on your back and lock in a choke. My other one, when he was 7, actually when he was 6, over the course of the summer decided to teach himself the Russian alphabet and how to fucking use it. We're not even Russian, okay? I was flabbergasted. But both of them, if I just look at them, they stop, okay? But those are my kids. I'm not my business how you deal with your children. Now, obviously, there is a certain line that could be crossed that if I saw somebody seriously, like, beating their fucking child, I would probably go up and say something. Because, look, a 3-year-old has no fucking clue what's going on. Okay, they just don't. They're 3. They're very underdeveloped. They have no idea. There's kids that can't even talk at that age. Do you know what I mean? There's kids still in diapers. You think a kid who is still shitting his pants understands what's going on, and, like, whatever. Not my fucking business, okay? If you spank your child, which in my opinion is very different than beating them, in the way that MMA Joey likes to put it, it's not my business. Now, if you were beating them, punching them in the face, giving them black eyes, breaking their noses, shit like this, I'll probably come and fuck you up. This is not that. Also, I don't even know that Neil Magny actually whoops his child. I think he's awkward on the mic, tried to engage in some trash talk, and it just didn't go over that well. That's all I think. Now, even if he does give his child a little spank, I doubt he's winding up and fucking hiding that ass. Do you know what I mean, dude? There's also... whatever. Anyways, he goes on about how, you know, people that say that it's just trash talk, and that it was misinterpreted, or, like, you know, he just awkwardly said it and didn't really mean it and things like that. He says, well, he had every opportunity to actually let us know that that wasn't what he meant. He had an entire press conference leading up to UFC 292 where he could have addressed these statements and sort of, like, you know, let us know what he actually meant. Well, hey, fuckface, you fat fucking retard. Are you talking about the press conference where Ian Garry literally would not allow Neil Magny to speak? Is that the press conference you're talking about? So any opportunity that Neil Magny had to actually clear the air, Ian Garry just shouted over him like a fucking child. Hey, you know what I mean? When could he have... When could Neil Magny have addressed it? When did he get to speak, bro? I'll tell you what, man. If there was ever a fucking argument for beating your children, look no further than the ogre himself, MMA Joey. This dude is the epitome of a child that was never fucking properly disciplined. I didn't even get beat as a child, dude. I got hit by my dad like one fucking time, and it was undeservingly so. He was intoxicated, okay? But there's other ways you can discipline your children. You don't have to be all soft and shit about it. This dude is soft as fucking baby shit. I can't believe it. Like, prime example of a child that should have maybe been smacked a little bit when he was a kid, okay? Because, my God, he screams entitlement, just screams it, and I can't stand it. You don't get to that size with a little bit of self-control, with discipline in your life. That's just not what happens. That's somebody who had no discipline growing up, has no idea how to implement discipline today, and just gorges himself with whatever the fuck is put in front of him, okay? And then, you know, he goes on about why people would have an issue with this. He's saying the MMA fans are upset, and he tries to compare it to a few other moments, which is, first of all, none of them are fucking comparable. But anyways, I'll get to that in a second. People have an issue with it because it's a virtue signaling. Nobody's like, yeah, beat your kids. Do you know, like, that's not really what people are saying. Ian Garry was virtue signaling. That's what people have an issue with. He's being a whiny little bitch about something that a 35-year-old black man said about his children and what he's going to do to Ian. Like, he's being virtue signaling. That's why people are annoyed, okay? Not because they like people beating their kids, not because they don't like people calling out people beating their kids, because Ian Garry did it in the most virtue signaling way possible, okay? He misrepresents literally everything. Now, it's funny that all of a sudden he's all about protecting the children also. I want to point that out because this is the same fucking guy that threw a hissy fit when Holly Holm said protect the children, and I would bet you my life savings that if Neil Magny had pronouns in his bio saying she, they, or changed his name to like fucking Nala Magny or some shit, he'd be fine with it. He'd be like, so what? What are we even talking about here? What about the Catholic Church? That's what he'd fucking say. Anyways, dude, him misrepresenting and comparing this to things like Sean Strickland.
You look back and you see some of the stuff Sean Strickland has said. You know, oh, women shouldn't be allowed to work or vote. Oh, Sean Strickland's so funny. Ha 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 ha. Israel Adesanya after KOing Alex Pereira. Oh, he taunts Alex Pereira's teenage son who's in the crowd by just pointing to him and falling to the ground. Oh, Israel Adesanya's a classless piece of shit. He's an embarrassment. Oh, so he taunted a teenager from the crowd in the cage, a teenager that previously taunted him years ago. Now he's getting his revenge on him, and now he's a classless piece of shit. But Neil Magny, who's literally admitting to beating his son, isn't. And then you have people. Dana White slaps his wife in a club in Mexico at 53 years old. And again, I haven't clutched my pearls about any of these instances at all. Not a single one that I've mentioned have I clutched my pearls about and cried about. But yet people say, oh well, she shouldn't have hit him first. Blah blah blah. It's a 53-year-old grown man slapping his wife in a club in Mexico, a crowded club in Mexico. What is he doing behind closed doors?
Saying that women shouldn't work and all this shit. Dude, first of all, when Sean Strickland speaks and when he says these things, he literally has the cadence of a comedian. He looks around the room, he's reading the room, he's trying to gauge what kind of reactions he's getting out of people, and then he keeps going based on that. He even clarified, we've been over this, we talked about this in the last video I did on this fat fucking retard, that Sean Strickland actually clarified his comments after the fact, said he was kind of joking, kind of not, but he does think gender role shit, whatever. We've already covered it. This seems to be a real fucking sticking point for this guy, okay? Izzy taunting Pereira's teenage son. He kept saying this, teenage son, years ago. Teenage son, years ago. Yeah, well, that teenager, years ago, when the first altercation happened, when Alex Pereira flatlined MMA JOEY's favorite fighter, Israel Adesanya, and then his son went and mocked him, was like 5 years old. Okay? He wasn't a teenager when that happened. He was a little child, and if there wasn't even video, if there was not video of the KO of that child mocking Israel Adesanya, I would bet my life that kid doesn't even remember that moment genuinely. He's just seen it in videos, okay? Israel Adesanya goes and does that. Now, I wasn't one that got overly upset about that. I just said it was a little fucking cringe and a little childish from Israel Adesanya, but that's what we've grown to expect from Israel Adesanya. Then he goes on about Dana White and his wife, okay? Oh, people say, well, she hit him first. He's a 53-year-old man. Imagine what goes on behind closed doors if he's willing to slap his wife in public at a crowded club in Mexico. Okay, well, the exact same fucking thing could be said for his wife. A 50-something-year-old woman is willing to smack her husband multiple times in the face before she got one back, by the way, in a crowded club in Mexico. Imagine what she does behind closed doors, as if women beating men doesn't exist, doesn't matter. He doesn't give a fuck about it. I swear to God, dude, Neil Magny needs to just put on a dress, come out as trans, and all these people will shut the fuck up about it, because this little bitch acting like he cares about kids now, okay, is fucking gross. He doesn't give a fuck. You know what I mean? He doesn't care about any mental damage that could be done by, drag queens reading disgusting fucking stories to kids. He doesn't care about the kinds of books that are in kids' schools that teach them how to give blowjobs at the age of fucking 10. But Neil Magny saying that he might smack his kid, okay? And then he says other people are saying, oh, well, he used a belt. Well, first of all, he didn't say that. So all these other people saying that are fucking just speculating, and they have absolutely no clue, okay? But he gets real upset about that also. He says that Neil Magny should be checked into asylum and shit like that. Like, dude, you should be, okay? You should be checked into a fat camp where you're not allowed to fucking eat for a year. Your body, dude, that guy could fast for an entire year. He'd be satiated as fuck. He doesn't need any more calories. I can't stand this progressive bitch. He might be the most progressive fuck in all of MMA YouTube. If there's a more progressive person, please let me know. about him in the comments below so I can use their content for my content. This has been me going after the ogre that is MMA Joey, the Progressive Ogre, talking about Ian Garry and Neil Magny, defending him tooth and nail, most likely because he's a cuck, and also he's changed his stance on protecting children, and also he loves Israel Adesanya and he hates Sean Strickland, and also what I found to be very funny, I forgot to mention this, this dude gets really upset about anything that might be perceived as racist. He thinks that people don't like Izzy because of racism. He thinks that people don't like Bilal because of racism. He thinks people don't like Usman because of racism. All this shit, okay? And then he's going to disparage the way that black parents parent their children. The amount of self-awareness this guy has is fucking nil. His views contradict each other every single time. It's unbelievable, dude. Protect the children, but only from black parents spanking them. Okay, like, it's fucking nuts. Anyways, dude, like and subscribe. I would greatly appreciate it. I will see you at the next video. Bye bye.